Welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Ruven of the Temple Institute, all alone here in the studio today. More about that in a moment. Today is the 21st day of the month of Mar Cheshvan, 5776, 3rd day of November 2015. It's Parshat Hayei Sarah this week, which begins with the death and burial of Sarah, the purchase of the double cave, the Machpelah in Hebron, the first land purchase made by a Jew, our father Abraham, in the land of Israel, the first, but certainly not the last. The parsha ends with the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka, Isaac and Rebekah, followed by the death of Abraham, who himself is then buried alongside Sarah in the Machpelah cave. I'm alone today in the studio because, of course, our beloved Rabbi Richmond is in the United States right now, beginning tonight. I'm recording this on Tuesday, afternoon of Tuesday, November 3rd, and tonight, in the evening of November 3rd, Rabbi Richmond will be giving his first talk in Bentonville, Arkansas. Fancy that, Bentonville, Arkansas. All this information is on our website, templeinstitute.org. You can go to any page in the website. You'll see a banner at the top of any page, and it'll take you to this page with all the information. Also, we've been posting this repeatedly on our Facebook page tonight. As I said, Bentonville, Arkansas. Hey, if you're in the neighborhood and you haven't already made a reservation, go for it. But I do suggest you call in advance. All the contact information is on our website. Tomorrow, November 4th, the rabbi will be speaking in Denver, Colorado. That will be followed by the 6th and 7th of November, in which the rabbi and Rabbi Richmond will be speaking in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The 9th and 10th, which is actually over the Shabbat. The rabbi and Rena will again be in Minneapolis. And again, all this information is on the website. The 12th of November, which is 1 week from tomorrow, 1 week from Thursday. The rabbi will be in Houston, Texas. Rabbi Richmond will also be speaking for women only in Houston, Texas. The 16th, they'll be in Abilene, Texas. And the 17th in Odessa, Texas, and the 18th in Ruidoso, New Mexico, followed by the 19th back in Lubbock, Texas. And they'll be in Lubbock, Texas, actually from the 19th through the 22nd of November. That will be including the Shabbat. Again, all these are public events, but you do need to make contact and make reservations in advance. All the information's on our website and Facebook page. And stay tuned because there may be additional events that will be scheduled in addition to these. So if none of these work out for you, keep going back to this page and you might find something new posted over the next week or two. So, rabbis in America, old Yitzchak is right here behind the microphone, and I've already said more than I usually say in an entire temple talk, so bear with me as I try to be interesting, imaginative, creative. You know, I felt great this morning when I came to work, and yes, this is work, as pleasurable as it may seem, and it is, but it's work just the same. I got into work and I started feeling tired and, I don't know, a little achy. It's that season. The seasons are changing here in Israel, and it does it in Israel when the seasons change from summer to winter. There's really not much of an autumn. And you'll go from one very warm, sunny day to a cold, windy, wet day. And, you're traveling on a bus, you're traveling on a train, people are coughing, and, So I hope I'm not getting anything, but if at some point during Temple Talk today it just goes silent, just listen respectfully and patiently to the silence till the show's over. It means I just fell asleep. And since I'm here alone in the studio, there's no one to wake me up. Not that I ever fall asleep. and need to be woken up when we're doing temple talk. So this week's parsha, Chayei Sarah, really, in a way, it's this week that marks the beginning of Jewish life in the world. And a whole lot of new events take place in this week's parsha, a whole lot of firsts. And a lot of those firsts have to do with Yitzchak, our patriarch. And Yitzchak is a very interesting figure. He's one of the three patriarchs, of course, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And he is the least known of the three. He seems to have the least adventures. He seems to be maybe tested the least, although that's kind of an ironic statement since it was he, after all, who was bound and put in an altar on Mount Moriah. So he really had the most difficult test of all of the patriarchs. But we seem to know less about Yitzchak than about Avraham or Yaakov. His personality doesn't seem to shine through as do his father and his son. But nevertheless, we might know more about Yitzchak than we think we do. First of all, it was last week's parsha where the Akedah, the binding of Yitzchak on Mount Moriah, that when God first spoke to Avraham and he said, take your son, your firstborn, your only son, the one you love, Yitzchak, that word love, ahava in Hebrew, it's the first time it's mentioned in Torah. It's the first time in the book of Genesis that the word ahava in any form is mentioned. So very interesting that the first person, the first individual, let's just go all out and say, in the history of the world, who is loved, and that love is worthy of notes by the Torah, is Yitzchak. I mean, it makes sense after all. He is also the first Jewish boy. He's the first child born of Jewish parents. Now, of course, the term Jewish is not so applicable. It's a little bit anachronistic here because that appellation for the Jewish people wouldn't come into use for many centuries after Avraham and Sarah and Yitzchak. But the word Hebrew, Ivri, was a contemporary term used for Avraham. Of course, Ivri means me'ever, from the other side. And we've spoken about this many times in the past. Avraham was from the other side. He came from the other side of the river. He came from the other side of town. He was different. He was always different. And as Bob once said, when they asked him no, that's not what he said. He said, what side are you on? No, that's not what he said either. He said, always on the outside. And when they asked him why it was, he said, just because. Avraham is on the other side, the outside. He's outside of the norm. He's changing the world. So we can call him a Hebrew because that means from the other side. And so Yitzchak is the first Hebrew child in the world, the first child to be circumcised at 8 days. Of course, Yishmael was circumcised, but he was 13 years old. But Yitzchak, 8 days, he's circumcised. He's really the first normative Jewish boy. Not only that, this word ahava, love, which first appears referring to Abraham's love for his son Yitzchak, is used again, and the second time it's used is when Rebecca, is brought by Eliezer to meet her future husband, Yitzchak, and beautiful story. And as Rivka approaches from afar, very beautiful. Maybe we can find it in the text right here. I have it right here. Oh yes, very beautiful. Let's begin here. Eliezer has gone afar. He's gone to Avraham's hometown, where he came from when God said, Lech lecha, go unto yourself, go unto the land that I'll show you. He went all the way back there on Avraham's orders to find a wife, an appropriate wife for Yitzchak. And of course, he finds the lovely, the beautiful, the resilient, the person full of chesed, of loving kindness, Rivka, who is just an amazing figure in herself, dynamic, strong, powerful. And she consents to go back with this man, Eliezer, and to marry Yitzchak. And we pick up here, let's pick up with chapter 24, verse 55 in the book of Genesis. Her brother, referring to Rivka, Rebecca, her brother and mother said, "Let the maiden remain with us a year or 10 months, then she will go." He said to them, he being Eliezer, said to them, "Do not delay me now that Hashem has made my journey successful. Send me, and I will go to my master, Avraham." And they said, "Let us call the maiden and ask her decision." They called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" And she said, "I will go." So they escorted Rebekah, their sister, and her nurse, as well as Abraham's servant and his men. They blessed Rebekah and said to her, "Our sister, may you come to be thousands of myriads, and may your offspring inherit the gate of its foes," a blessing that we give to our Jewish daughters to this day. Then Rebekah arose with her maidens. They rode upon the camels and proceeded after the man. The servant took Rebekah and went. So they're returning now to the land of Israel, land of Canaan, to meet Yitzchak. And we continue. Now Isaac, Yitzchak, came forth from having gone to Be'er Lahairoi, for he dwelt in the south country, the Negev. Yitzchak went out to supplicate in the field towards evening, and he raised his eyes and saw, and behold, camels were coming. And Rebekah raised her eyes and saw Yitzchak. She inclined while upon the camel. And she said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field toward us?" And the servant said, "He is my master." She then took the veil and covered herself. The servant told Yitzchak of all the things he had done. And Yitzchak brought her into the tent of Sarah his mother. He married Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And thus was Yitzchak consoled after his mother. So here it is. Love. Love between husband and wife, man and woman, between Yitzchak and Rivka. Again, only the second time that this word ahava, which is a beautiful word, is mentioned in the Torah, and this time it is mentioned as the dynamic that describes the relationship between Rivka and Yitzchak, Rebekah and Isaac, and of course, as we'll learn in weeks to come, that they will go through their trials and tribulations and they won't agree on everything, but love will bond them together through thick and thin. And this word ahava, such a beautiful word, Aleph, He, Bet, He. If you think of the ineffable name of Hashem and the tetragrammaton, the 4-letter word that is used in Hebrew to signify that, you see the parallel between Aleph, He, Bet, He, and Yud, Ke, Vav, Ke. There's a similarity there. And of course, Aleph, He, Bet, He, Ahava, has in it an Aleph and a Bet, which, it's Aleph, Bet, it's alphabet, it's A-B, it's the building blocks. It's the building blocks of any relationship, whether it be between man and woman, man and man, God and man. And Ahava has a numerical value. Aleph, 1, He, 5, Bet, 2, He, 5, of 13. 13, which is a beautiful and beloved number in Hebrew, because it means so many things. It's like the 13 attributes of Rachamim, of God's loving kindness, that we say each day in our tefillah and our prayer. 13 is the same gematria as Ehad, 1. So 13 of Ahava is 1. So two people in love with Ahava are one. They're one soul. And you know what? Let's say two people have Ahava. So that's 2 times Ahava. Let's go there. So 2 times 13, that's 26. And guess what? 26 is the gematria of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the tetragrammaton that signifies God's name. And God is one. So 1 times 1 is 1. And when it comes to Ahava, 1 plus 1 is 1. So it's a very beautiful word. And again, it described Abraham's love for Yitzchak when God called Abraham. And God called it. God said, the one you love. God designated that. And of course, now it's signifying the love between Yitzchak and Rivka, who just met. But even though it was the world's first arranged marriage, it's also the first marriage based on love between husband and wife, between man and woman. Very, very beautiful. So many firsts for Yitzchak. Of course, Sarah is the first person in Torah whose death is mentioned more than just in passing, more than just as a chronological footnote. She's the first one who is wept over by Avraham. He shed a tear. He shed tears for her. We read that at the very beginning of this week's parsha, that he wept for her. And he also eulogized her. She's the first one to be eulogized. And of course, she's the first one to be buried, at least the first one mentioned by Torah to have been buried. And of course, all these aspects of death and mourning are part of the Jewish tradition, the way of dealing with death to this day. And it all began here. And of course, that Machpelah cave, double cave, which sits in the field of Machpelah in Hebron, that Avraham purchased, that was the first purchase made by a Jew, by a Hebrew, by an Israelite, however you want to call it, in the land of Israel. And it is recorded in full and in detail. Avraham paid full cash, full 400 shekel of silver for the cave, and it was offered to him for free, but he refused it for free. He wanted to pay for it. He wanted to have full ownership of it. He didn't want anyone to ever be able to question Israel's rightful ownership over this land, over this cave. And of course, that cave would serve to be the burial place for all the patriarchs and matriarchs, with the exception, of course, of Rachel Imenu, Rachel, our mother, who was buried on the way, but not buried in Machpelah in Hebron. And of course, this Shabbat here in Israel has become a traditional Shabbat where many, many, many Jews go to Hebron in order to honor Sarah Imenu, to honor our matriarch Sarah, and to honor and commemorate the purchase of the Machpelah burial site. Other firsts. Let's see what we have here. Maybe I mentioned them all. Oh, here's a very interesting thing about Yitzchak. He was born, he lived, he died, all in the land of Israel. He never left the land of Israel. He was the one patriarch who never left the land of Israel. Of all the patriarchs and matriarchs, he was the only one. In fact, not until Israel would go into exile into Egypt and be brought out of exile by God, go through 40 years in the desert, and then enter into the land of Israel. Not until then would there be another Jew who would be born, live, and die all in the land of Israel without setting foot ever outside the land of Israel. This is a tremendous merit that Yitzchak enjoys. And other than that, what do we know about Yitzchak? He dug wells. He dug a lot of wells. We'll get to that not in this week's parsha, but in next week's. He dug a lot of wells in the land of Israel. And of course, while that might not, on the face of it, seem like a particularly exciting venture, I mean, what is he, an engineer? Actually digging a well and bringing water up out of the earth symbolically is akin to revealing God's Torah, to the light of day, as Torah is or water, I should say, is a metaphor for the Torah, because it's life-giving. It comes to the surface, it rises up to the surface, and it fills all that it's placed into. Living water. So Yitzchak was quite a personality in his own light, even if, as I said earlier, he seems a little shadowy. We don't seem to know quite as many details about him as the other patriarchs. And of course, Yitzchak is associated with the attribute of gvura, of harshness, of din, of judgment. Not that he was a harsh person or a judgmental person, but of these aspects that our patriarchs embodied. Avraham is a man of chesed, a man of loving kindness, a giving man, an outgoing man. Of course he was outgoing. He gathered people around him. He opened his doors. He brought people to Hashem. Yitzchak was more inward, more reserved. And that's why we seem to know less about him. Yaakov, as we'll see later on, took both of these attributes, the outgoing and the inward, the hesed and the gvura, the loving kindness and the judgment, and combined them. And that, of course, is the beauty and what's called tamimut, perfection or purity of Yaakov. But Yitzchak is a more reserved figure. This story that I read earlier of Yitzchak and Rivka, when they first met, it said that Yitzchak was in the field. He was in the field. The word that in the translation I used was supplicate. Isaac went out to supplicate in the field toward evening. Whoa. Here's the music. Gotta go. That went fast. We'll pick this up right after this little break. Stay right with us. Temple Talk. Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven by myself in the studio. Today, the 21st of Mar Cheshvan 5776, November 3rd, 2015, Rabbi Richmond begins his United States Speaking and Engagement Tour tonight, November 3rd in Bentonville, Arkansas. And you can read all about his schedule, as we pointed out earlier, by going to templeinstitute.org or visiting the Temple Institute's Facebook page. If you have a chance, go and see and hear the rabbi live and in person. It's well worth it. Well worth whatever trip it may take. I've been talking about Chayei Sarah, the parsha, this week's parsha, and I was talking about, as we concluded the first half of the show, the meeting between Yitzchak and Rivka in the field. And Yitzchak was walking in the field. As I mentioned, the English word used was in that translation, he was supplicating. What exactly does that mean? Let me go back to the Hebrew. Let's have a look at that one more time. I'm just now fiddling around looking for that. Okay, here we go. Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basadeh lifnot arev. The word in Hebrew, Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach. It's a very beautiful word in Hebrew. And it can mean to pray, to meditate, to be focused on a connection with God. And that's what he was doing in that field. And he was doing it just before evening, meaning late afternoon. And this is why Yitzchak is associated with the afternoon prayer. Of course, we pray 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening. And Avraham, who was Vayashkem Baboker, Avraham got up early in the morning. He got up early in the morning to go to Har Moriah, to Mount Moriah, to the Akedah, to the binding of Yitzchak. He was a morning person. And so he is associated with the morning service, Shacharit, the morning prayer. And he's associated with the morning Tamid, the morning offering in the Holy Temple. And Yitzchak is an afternoon person. And of course, Yaakov, who had a vision of the Holy Temple while sleeping in the evening, is an evening person. He's associated with Mariv Aravit, the evening prayer. And Yitzchak was meditating in a field, and as we've said many, many times, Yitzchak, this field, is none other than Mount Moriah, Har Habayit, the place of the Holy Temple. And Avraham, he went to Mount Moriah. He went to the place of the Holy Temple. It was a mountain for him. He understood the concept, the idea, the reality of the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, as a mountain, whatever that means. A challenge is something a little distant, foreboding, something that you have to climb toward, while Yitzchak saw it as a field in which he can pray, a field in which he meets his beloved, a field in which he takes his beloved into the tent of his mother, and his mother, Sarah, Rashi tells us, among others, that her tent was always illuminated. It had a light in it that came all the time, just like the menorah in the Holy Temple. And as we recall in last week's Torah reading, when the 3 strangers came upon Avraham, and he ran to Sarah and he said, prepare for them bread. When she was in her tent, he went to her tent, prepare bread. She always had bread ready in her tent, and that is symbolic of the showbread, the table of the showbread. Her tent was a mini mishkan, a mini tabernacle, a mini holy temple. And so it's a very beautiful image that the Torah and our sages are creating here of Yitzchak and Rivka in the field, which is the place of the Holy Temple, together united in love, ahava, and in the dwelling place of Sarah, where there's always the continual lamp illumination of the menorah, and the sustenance, the blessing of sustenance, as represented by the loaves of the showbread. So this is, again, first Jewish boy, first Jewish baby, first Jewish marriage, first Jewish father, first Jewish mother, all these things, and immediately we have this beautiful imagery of the Holy Temple and the love and unity and blessing that it inspires. This is the beginning of the story. So, it leads me to what's going on now. We're not at the end of the story yet, but we're getting there. What's going on the Temple Mount today? A lot of things. Some things good, some things not so good. What's good? Good is that through thick and thin, good and bad, through all the trials and tribulations that are put before them, both by the Mohammedans, the Ishmaelites, who despise our presence on the Temple Mount, also by the Israeli government, who can't quite cope with it. Through thick and thin, Jews are still going up to the Temple Mount. The numbers are still increasing, much to the consternation of our cousins, the Muslims, and much to the consternation, I'm very sorry to say, of many of our political leaders and pundits who, well, if they just wouldn't go up there, things would be okay. That's what they say. That's what they say. But the numbers are increasing, and the difficulties and the animosity being expressed toward Jews that go up to the Temple Mount, to my great, great sorrow, by other Jews, not many, but some other Jews here in the land of Israel. It's not discouraging anybody. In fact, I think it's encouraging people. More and more people are getting it, that it really is the source of who we are. It's our life preserver. It's our life spring. It's living waters. It's all these things. It's a field. It's a mountain. It's a house for us, for Israel, for all mankind. And people are going up more and more. And on the not so positive side, our government has made some decrees, such as no members of Knesset are allowed to go up to the Temple Mount, because that might be provocative. And that is, first of all, it's not legal. Second of all, it's a very, very pathetic response to terror. And third of all, that's no way to show sovereignty, and that's no way to show your connection to the place of the Holy Temple. That's no way to express that word we've been talking about today, ahava, love for Hashem or love for one another. The place to express that is on the Temple Mount. Besides that, the police have approached a number of activists and have given them restraining orders, I guess is what you call it in English, to keep them away from the Temple Mount, even away from Jerusalem. This is a very radical step, very draconian, and I suppose they will say, we just want to calm things down. But as we know, in the face of terror, if you calm things down by retreating, you haven't calmed things down at all. You've only fanned the flames of terror, and you've only encouraged it, and your next stop will be another retreat. So this is a very, very unfortunate response. And again, so much of the debate is it about the Temple Mount? Is it not about the Temple Mount? The violence, which has been a little bit less intense this past week, but still every day there's a stabbing or attempted stabbing or some other attempted terror act. I don't know if it's really less intense or our security forces and citizens are just more alert now, and so attacks are being foiled before they can take place. Is it because of the Temple Mount, or is that just an excuse? For 100 years, the Arabs here in the land of Israel have been using the Temple Mount as an excuse to kill Jews. The Mufti of Jerusalem, Husseini, in the 20s and 30s and 40s, of course, used the Temple Mount as his excuse to try to kill as many Jews as possible, to whip up the local Arabs to kill Jews. And they killed many Jews. This is the same Mufti who the Prime Minister Netanyahu mentioned recently in a speech as being an ally and an inspiration to Hitler. And yes, they were indeed allies. And yes, indeed, he was an inspiration. And yes, indeed, he did confer with Hitler on the plan to exterminate the Jews, because the last thing he wanted were the Jews to flee Europe and come to the land of Israel. So the Temple Mount has been an excuse and a rallying call for a Muslim to kill Jews, even during the time of the British Mandate, when Jews were not allowed to go up onto the Temple Mount. So it hasn't changed. Even then they said the Jews are trying to change the status quo in the Temple Mount. The Jews are trying to destroy Al-Aqsa. We posted a video today, this week, that was taken by a woman by the name of Jerusalem Jane, a Christian activist, who was stopped on the Temple Mount this past week for having said the Shema, statement of faith, months ago, and having filmed it on the Temple Mount. She was stopped by two Muslims in the Temple Mount who identified themselves as Jordanian police. Are they Jordanian police? Well, there haven't been Jordanian police on the Temple Mount up till now, but that was one of the things that were being discussed 2 weeks ago when Netanyahu met with Kerry and Abdullah, the king of Jordan, to discuss making changes in order to not change the status quo. How's that? They said later that there would be no Jordanian police on the Temple Mount, plainclothes police, but guess what? They identify themselves as such. Were they? Were they not? I don't know. There's a lot that we're not being told. All that doesn't bode well. Unfortunately, our Prime Minister is a man of words, but not a man of his word. He speaks well, he loves to speak, he loves to talk, he nails it when it comes to phrasing. He can go to the UN, he can stand before the cameras, he can sit in the Oval Office with Obama, and he can say things which inspire, and that's great. But there is a world between his words and his actions, his deeds. And he may say no retreat, but he retreats. He may say that the connection between Jews and the Temple Mount, the place of the Holy Temple, will never ever be severed. But it's he himself who is taking steps to sever that connection. It's unfortunate because he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand, really. And here's the conundrum, or the sort of a Mobius strip type of inversion that we've been talking about for a number of weeks now. That is it about the Temple Mount or isn't it? Did the Muslims need an excuse to attack Jews and kill Jews? No. Their preachers are preaching it every day from every mosque in the land of Israel and probably around the world. They don't need the Temple excuse as Temple Mount as the match to ignite the passion, the hatred. But they do use it. And yes, it is really all about the Temple Mount, because Jewish feet are treading on the Temple Mount, and Jewish prayer is being said on the Temple Mount, whether they like it or not, whether it's permissible or not. And yes, that is a game changer, because it is our destiny, and we aren't stepping back from it, but we're drawing closer to it. And they're right. They're right to be alarmed. They're right to be terrified, but only, of course, if they see the return of Israel to the Holy Temple, to the rebuilding of the Holy Temple, the renewal of the divine service, and the unification of all mankind in the service of God. Only if they see that as a threat and as an abomination, as they call it. Only then do they have a reason and a need to be terrified. And I guess if they feel terrified, then they're doing what they need to do. But the Temple Mount, just like that field where Yitzchak and Rivka met for the first time, where she covered herself in her veil, first recorded incident of modesty in the Torah. And she said, "Who is that man?" And Eliezer, Yitzchak's servant, said, "That's my master, Yitzchak." And Yitzchak saw Rivka from afar, and the moment they set eyes upon one another, it was love. And they drew together in love and in the bond of marriage. That is the Holy Temple. That is the message of the Holy Temple. That's the message of Isaiah. My house we call a house of prayer for all nations, and all the nations will go up unto the house of Yaakov, of Jacob. That's the message. And I'm sorry if there are people who are afraid of that. And unfortunately, there are also Jews here in the land of Israel who are intimidated by that and don't understand it. And feel, why can't we get along by separating things and dividing things and splitting up and parceling things out, and one for me and one for you, and one for me and two for you, and in the spirit of compromise, why can't we make peace? But the entire message of Torah and the entire message of the Holy Temple is unity, drawing together, bringing together. not dividing, but uniting. And so any peace plan, any plan for, to get along by separating ourselves, it's just not going to work. There is no such thing as peace through division in the Torah. Peace, shalom. It's the same word as shalem, which means one, whole, perfection. These are all definitions of that same word, shalom, shalem, shin, lamed, mem. It's indivisible, just like ahava, echad, one. It's all indivisible. So we're all either going to get together and unite it, see this through to the end, or we're going to divide and disperse and live miserable lives, each in his own little world. But of course that's not going to happen. That's not the plan, and that really is not the way it's going right now. Because all the opposition, all the violence, all the outcry are all signals that we've reached a point in history where there's no going back. And yes, when Israel returned, when the people of Israel returned to the land of Israel, stepped back into the pages of history, stepped back into God's program for Israel and for mankind, it's not like dipping your toe in the water and saying, you know what, it's kind of cold today, I think I'll come back tomorrow. No, we jumped in, we fought for independence. There's no going back now, there's only moving forward. And the more united we are as a people moving forward, the easier it will be for us, and the less opposition we'll have. Because yes, if we as a nation, as a people, show our determination to return to who we're meant to be, to return to the place of the Holy Temple, to rededicate ourselves as individuals and as a nation to our purpose, which is to bring light into this world, then even our sworn enemies will accept that and appreciate that and admire that and value that, and they will in turn recalibrate their reaction. That I can promise you, because that is God's promise. And we just need to move forward with determination. Again, that message that God, the mantra that God gave to Abraham, Lech Lecha, go forward, go into yourself, go to where I tell you, go for it, with no distractions. And again, take that same message and apply it to that closing scene that we've been talking about today of Rivka and Yitzchak meeting, their eyes upon one another, focused. Yitzchak still in his state of meditation, in his state of unification, when Rivka comes into his sights. There's no break there. There's no time out. It's all part of the place and time and space and spirituality where we need to be and where we're heading, which is embodied by the Holy Temple, which is the main force, focus, focal point, and what's that word? I don't know, vortex, I don't know what, of God's presence here on earth, God's presence in our lives in reality. So I think I probably have successfully managed to talk for 45 minutes as we draw to a close here. I think and I hope we have made the connection with the beginning of Jewish history, which takes place in this week's parsha, the first Jewish child, the first Jewish marriage, the first Jewish arranged marriage, the first Jewish marriage by love, the first Jewish mother to pass away, the first Jewish father to pass away, the burial, all these firsts and all these landmark steps which to this day guide our lives as Jews. And of course, it couldn't be complete, it wouldn't be complete without the mention, even in remez, even as a hint, of the Holy Temple, and that central part the Holy Temple plays for us, all of humanity, in our lives and the lives of mankind. Thank you so much for being with me this week, as I've been here by myself. I'll be here again next week by myself. If you can take it, you can stand a little more, maybe come back next week. Thanks for being with me. Temple Talk.